All right, I'd like to call the November 18th, 2013 meeting of the Salem Township Planning Commission to order. And as Ms. Merlot is absent tonight, could you take over, Ms. Crooks, in terms of handling the secretary duties?
Yes.
Okay. So first thing would be roll call.
Okay. Chairman Shepherd,
Here?
Ms. Merlo, absent and excused. Ms. McLaughlin. Here. Mr. Khan,
Here.
Ms. Kelly. Here. Ms. Petrowski. Here. Mr. Lewandowski.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Very good. Next item is approval of agenda. Would someone like, I guess I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda as submitted. And second?
Second.
Mr. Lewandowski. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? We've passed the agenda. Okay. First item of business, or the next item of business is public comment. And, just as an overview for people, we're going to conduct a public hearing related to the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. And so if you would care to comment related to that, I would prefer that you speak during the public comment portion of that public hearing, okay? But other public comments at this time? Yes, Ms. Hamilton.
Mr. Shepherd, what would be your preference for when you talk about the ordinance that was sent back from the board? To hear that now or at that business item?
If the public would care to comment, I think they can do it now.
Okay.
Because I think we're not having a new public hearing related to the zoning ordinance, so if you have opinions, I think now is the time to enter them into the record.
Okay, in what's been sent back to the township, we were assured at the last planning commission meeting that there were simply minor changes, insignificant changes. On page 60-3, there's a very large addition to the ordinance under noise. It gives examples of noises. It gives exemption to noises, but there's no exemptions for farmers or for tractors. Then it talks about the maximum permitted sound levels. 55 decibels in rural districts or residential districts. I've given to Mrs. Petrowski several charts from the internet from institutes that deal with sounds. I'm not an expert in sounds. And the discussion that I'm having right now with you is probably at 55 to 60 decibels because I'm talking at slightly louder than my normal speaking voice. And that information is found in the charts, again, that I've submitted to be part of the official record for tonight. So if this is left in this ordinance, we will have people, I'm sure, going after our farm because our tractors operate at 90 decibels. I talked to Mark, and he said the very first tractor we bought with a cab, John Deere advertised it, that inside the cab, you rode at 86 decibels. Significantly greater than this little chart allows in residential or rural districts. My parents have a standby whole house generator. My mother has rheumatoid arthritis, hence the generator. Over in my neighborhood, we're all generating our own power right now. It's estimated that on Friday morning at midnight, we may have Edison back. My parents' home and that generator are very close to the property line, and it runs at greater than 50 decibels. And in weather like this, it runs 24 hours a day until Edison restores their power. So I would like to see the Planning Commission either remove this or put something reasonable in its place. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Yes, I agree with Linda Hamilton on her comments, and I'm from the other end of the spectrum in a sense that I don't enjoy listening to somebody screaming motorcycle up and down next to my house when they're out there for 6 hours at a time, or they decide to let off fireworks for 4 hours at a time, and they're using M80s that give an impression to people, and they do that. And so those are the kinds of noises I have a problem with. I don't have a problem with the persons who live in my neighborhood who use the chainsaw, they're riding more, their tractor, or other things, but those are periodic noises. I don't even mind the neighbor who every once in a while comes out for half an hour behind the property and shoots off his Zendelin gun for half an hour. At least I know what he's doing back there, and most times it's only for a certain amount of time, so it has some sense. And I'd like to see our ordinance reflect that, so that we don't have to endure those long periods of time when it's just outrageous for the noise level. Thank you.
Any others? Mr. Horton?
I live in Hamburg Township, and I also have some property in Whitmore Lake, and Whitmore Lake, I think, is 80 decibels on a commercial. It's a lot different than this one. And Hamburg has 80. To my recollection, I talked to the ordinance person in Hamburg, and he said they've only really had, since their ordinance went in effect, one incident where they actually had to get the meter out because somebody in commercial had a fan that ran all the time to clean air when they sprayed, and the people up were on a hill behind them, and they made quite an issue, but they couldn't find anything wrong with that particular place. Even with a meter, it wasn't over 80 decibels at the fence line. And had the fellow put a fence up, you know, they wouldn't have got even that, you know, not even close to 80. But it seems like this is awful low. Not that I'm a sound engineer, but compared to Whitmore Lake and Hamburg, it is kind of low. I think I gave Mrs. McLaughlin those noise ordinance. Not that I'm complaining, but it just seems low.
Yes.
It's a way for your neighbor, if somebody don't like you, to come in here all the time and complain. Not that it's ever happened. I don't think.
Okay. Any other public comment? Very good. That's the end of public comment. Next we go to correspondence, and we'll talk about general correspondence as opposed to related to the public hearing. And I don't believe there's been any in my mailbox. We have
Planning and zoning news from,
for which month? I thought we had that last
maybe
month,
we
but,
did. I just got
okay. But that's it for correspondence, basically.
Yeah, that was it.
One planning and zoning. Okay, so now we come to the public hearing portion of the meeting agenda. And I hope you've all had a chance to see this. We've had there's a Parks Recreation and Open Space Committee, right, that the township has, and they've worked in conjunction with the Planning Commission to create this, and with our professionals, and with the help of the citizens, to create this Parks Recreation Open Space Plan. The Planning Commission's role in this is to conduct a public hearing in accordance with DNR guidelines, and then send the plan either on to the township board with or without a recommendation to approve it, or return it to the committee for further work if that was merited. But those are the three choices. And the public hearing we're going to have is to hear your comments related to the content in this plan. And the way we're going to run this is we'll first have a brief overview of the plan by Mr. Nanny. Then we'll have a communications summary from Ms. Cripps for the communications, the commentary that's come in by mail or email, and then we'll have a time period for public comment, and then we'll wrap up the public hearing, hopefully. So, I'd like to make a motion that we open a public hearing in accordance with the Department of Natural Resources guidelines for the purpose of hearing public comments related to the potential adoption of a Parks Recreation Open Space Plan by the Salem Township Board. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Kelly. We need a roll call vote. Ms. Cripps?
Chairman Shepherd?
Yes.
Ms. Kelly? Yes. Ms. McLaughlin? Yes. Mr. Pond?
Yes.
Ms. Petrowski? Yes. Mr. Lewandowski?
Yes. Okay. We have unanimous consent, so, our public hearing is now open. And I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Nanny to give us a short synopsis of what this plan will do for the township if it's adopted.
Well, thank you. This is a special document for the township. As you mentioned, we're operating tonight based on the Michigan Department of Natural Resources guidelines for creating community parks and recreation plans. And the reason for that is that the primary purpose of this plan is to put the township in a position to be eligible for future grant funding opportunities for parks and recreation and open space projects that are envisioned by this plan. The state has a pool of money available through the Department of Natural Resources that's available to local governments on a project-by-project basis to help with park improvements or development of new parks. This document is a prerequisite to be able to gain access to those funds. The process that the Parks and Recreation and Open Space Committee went through developing this plan involved significant public input. We had an open house right outside the building here during the Flag Day parade and activities, and we had quite a large number of people that came and commented on what was being looked at and offered answers to a written survey, as well as some display boards that were up and making notations there. In addition, the committee looked at and focused on previous surveys. There were two previous surveys of township residents. One from a number of years ago, I think 1996, I believe, and then but a more recent one, 2011 as well, that covered, among other things, covered parks and recreation questions. And this plan is reflective of what was in those surveys as well. As I said, the goal is to become eligible for grant funding. As part of that, the plan must be adopted by the elected body of the community, so the township board in this case. And there was, in addition to the public input process during the development of the plan, there was a period of time when the plan has to be out for anybody to review, and so that the plan has been out, available for public review, both here at the Township Hall and at the library for more than a month now, and that availability was advertised as well in accordance with the guidelines. So at this point, the document is ready to move forward through through the public hearing and ultimately through the adoption process. The plan includes both a set of goals, and this is something that's very important to the grant funding process, is that the state wants the township to identify specific goals to focus on. And so there's section 6 of the plan identifies the goals that have been developed by the committee. And then it includes an action plan, which is section 7, starting on page 24, near the end of the main body of the plan, that identifies specific policies and potential programs for the township board to consider as it looks at future budgets for parks, recreation, and open space development in the township. All of this is still ultimately recommendations to the board. The board takes action on any budget items, and so it ultimately have control over decisions related to individual projects and decisions related to seeking grants for specific projects in the future. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cripps, you said we've had some we've received some comments. Would you care to?
Yes, I received 3 emails and 1 call, and all of these are in favor of the plan, and all of these people were interested in the horse trails, the equestrian trails. Mercy Robertson, Barbara Cummings, and Nancy Harm. And I've got the direct phone call came from Mr. Urick, Paul Urick, all in favor of adopting this plan.
All right, thank you. Now, we'll open up the period for public comment. Does anyone care to comment related to this plan? Mr. Horton?
I think it's great.
I'm sorry?
I think the plan is great.
Oh, okay. That's fine. You don't have to elaborate. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. At that point, I think we've come to the end of the public hearing, and I would like to make a motion that we close the public hearing at 7:47 PM. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Lewandowski. What roll call vote to close as well, I'm sure. So,
Chairman Shepherd,
yes.
Mr. Lewandowski,
Yes.
Ms. McLaughlin? Yes. Mr. Khan?
Yes.
Ms. Kelly? Yes. Ms. Petrowski? Yes.
Motion passes. And we've concluded the public hearing related to the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. And then we move on to new business items. And the first new business item is item 13006, which is the Parks and Recreation Plan. And so at this point, I'd like to open up the discussion amongst the planning commissioners and/or our experts related to any questions we have remaining with regard to the plan. We have a short period of time for that, and then perhaps we'll move forward and see if we can create a recommendation. So, who would like to speak? I'm looking to the right, and everybody's quiet, and we're quiet on the left. Oh, I'll just say, we had a very thorough review of this. I had the good fortune to participate in the committee. I think the work is very sound, and there's a number of goals spelled out in the back, and I find that they're reasonable goals, and the action plan is also reasonable, and there's nothing there that is drastic change in the immediate future, but it's moving the township forward in a direction where we could help preserve our open spaces and have some improved recreational opportunities for the township residents. And so I'm personally in support of this. Mr. Lewandowski?
Is this a 5-year plan, and it has to be renewed or reviewed every 5 years or updated?
Yes, it is. It's a 5-year document, and so to continue to be eligible for state grants, essentially a new plan would need to be adopted 5 years from now. 5 years from basically 2019. So 5 years from next year. If there are things that weren't completed, obviously they could be simply carried over into the new document. but it would be a new plan that would be presented again to the state for their review.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? I know Ms. Petrowski's helped create the plan, so I'm sure she's satisfied. It's a good piece of work.
Go ahead.
Well, fine. I'm ready to entertain a motion from one of the commissioners. Yes, Mr. Gann.
Just two items, actually, I wanted to mention before you
Thank you.
take action on. One, we have Sandy Petrowski was gracious and sent a few minor typos that she noted in the plan. We'll take care of those typos, and unfortunately, one of them is Daryl's name as well, so we'll correct the spelling of his name. But the other thing I wanted to mention was that it came in after the document was put together for this public hearing, is that we do have some photographs from the open house event, the Flag Day event, that we're going to tuck into the document. There's space in the document to add those in, and so we'll tuck those into the final version. They don't affect the policy, they don't affect the format of the document, but we did want to include those pictures. They just came after the document was printed.
Very good. Anything else?
Yeah, page 7, very bottom, dedicated millage. Special property tax millage can be used to generate revenues for a specific purchase, such as a land or development rights acquisition or fund. So the township has a right to impose a millage on its people to fund a plan that has been passed.
Actually, that's not correct.
Didn't define it for, there you go.
Top paragraph there notes that any millage would have to be done through voter approval. It's just like any millage. That is a principle. What this list is on page 7 under revenue sources are all the potential revenue sources that are available to the township to fund parks, recreation, and open space projects. In no way does that suggest that all of them are going to be used. The township does have some money that has been put in the budget through the general fund, and the township board retains the full ability and authority to decide the budget, what the budget should be for this and any other township function. This is simply a required element of the plan that we identify all the possible sources of revenue that could be used.
And a question on the locations of these. Page 20, future park locations, this is just an example? Or is this the limitation, or is this the first go-around suggestion?
This is, page 20 is part of the Flag Day open house event. One of the items that we had at that event was a large aerial photo of the town. And we invited people to literally draw on the photo and identify things that were important to them. And as it notes right down at the bottom of the map, this is a summary of
That's
the
fine.
participant-generated activities,
So-
and not part of the
So
element.
how, my concern on both of these things is sometimes when something is inferred or the perception of a title, it becomes the rule or interpreted as the rule. Our government has that problem. And I look at the first one, okay, millage, that's fine. We vote for millage from there. If this was maybe under some separate report where it just said, here you go, but putting it in here may infer, it may initially mislead of, hey, these are the only spots. Is there a declarative statement in here that says something contrary to this, that, by the way, this is open, this is completely up for discussion, this is not inclusive, exclusive?
Well, that's why it's part, first of all, it says it's part of the open house event right at the top. It's a summary of the exercise for the mapping. In the same way, the title at the top of the map says Flag Day Open House Mapping Exercise. And then, of course, you have the text box there that boldly says that this is simply a
Okay,
exercise.
so if it's not part of the plan, why is it in the book?
Well, because it's
I'll
part
ask
of
that a different way.
Right, and that's a great question. And because it's part of the public input. In
Okay.
all of this, it's important, and this is, again, goes back to the state guidelines. They want to see that there's been robust public input and a variety of methods have been used. And so this was one of the methods that was used to identify elements to include. The core plan in terms of where the recommendations are, that's really section 6 and 7, the goals and the action plan. That's where the rubber hits the road, that's where the committee identified the specific elements that they together had a consensus on that should be included, recommending to the board.
As I understand it, right, it's like section 6 and section 7 are the output, which are the goals and the action plan, and the rest of it is the preamble and the methodology discussion, more or less.
Exactly. But the reason it's in the plan this way is because the state wants to see the evidence of that robust public input process.
And I'm familiar with both sides of this discussion because this is, I think we did it once in committee, and then we did it in this room last month, and now we're cleaning up the loose edges, let's say, on the question that's there, because it's not like, I mean, if somebody just flips through the pages, you certainly have the potential to see that in the wrong light, but if you read it carefully, I'm satisfied it's okay, but that's just my opinion.
Okay, when it comes to recreational activities, pathways, trails, or anything like that, is there anything in here that includes motorized? One thing Michigan is known for is its trail system, be it its old railways or logging trails, and motorcycles, snowmobiles, things like that during the proper seasons. Is there any overall subject title on that?
There's not currently a recommendation to add off-road vehicle trails or snowmobile trails to this does focus on really two aspects: bicycling, walking, and then horses.
Okay.
Sorry, you have a horse.
May get one. Okay, well, I'll probably touch on that one more. And maybe if now's the time, I think it should include that.
I'm sorry?
I think it should include that, because recreation in Michigan is, I mean, if there was a lake and you wanted to have a park and you said you can't go out on that and fish on that lake, I mean, it was a multiple acre lake or something like that, and they said you can't go out on that with a motorboat or something, go out and fish, there'd be an uprising. And I think keeping away from things that are of motorized recreational usage is slanted.
Well, one thing to keep in mind is this plan doesn't prevent somebody from creating
Okay.
off-road vehicle trail. What it does is it sets the priorities for potential projects that the township may participate in, and especially those projects where they may go out to try to get state grant funding for.
Does the DNR support snowmobile trips?
They do, and
Do they support-
they certainly have them in many areas. They have state lands where those are available right now.
I would strongly support putting at least a space in here, nothing more or less than the equestrian that talks about motorized usage.
What's your proposal?
As I said, I mean, if we're gonna have, there's townships that have, I'm trying to get my boys, I don't think I'm gonna be able to do it this year, obviously, because of weather. There's a park up in, I believe it's in Burton, outside of Flint, in the township of Burton. It's a BMX track. It's an open park. Kids go up there, moms, dads, kids, and it's on bicycles, and it's a park. The kids go up there and they race their bicycles down through there. And likewise, there's parks where, I mean, there's areas that are set off that are owned, maintained by the state, that are snowmobile trails, that are motorcycle trails, ex-logging trails, things like that.
I guess one thing I guess I'll keep in mind with this a lot of the discussion that we had at the committee level involved not focusing on what already exists and not duplicating what already exists. And there are a number of facilities in the area that do allow for off-road, especially snowmobiles, but off-road vehicle trails, either to state recreation areas or like the Island Lake State Park. There's a number of places in the area that do have that, and so the question was,
Are you arguing this point with me?
no, I'm simply
Okay,
saying.
I'm just making sure.
Well,
Okay.
One of the elements that was included in the plan was a desire to not duplicate what exists elsewhere. So in the same way, major athletic fields are not included because they are available in the surrounding area.
Okay, well, okay, I'll hit them one at a time. There's more than one place to ride a horse around here, particularly the people that have horses usually have corrals and ride them on their own property. Okay, so that would seem duplication if you just want to go after the equestrian side. I'm all for people loving horses, great, I'm not a horse guy. But if we want to talk about sporting fields, I will tell you, Salem Township, you would do well bringing people from outside communities in here by putting up a couple more baseball or softball fields. I've been involved with Salem softball, junior league for 10 years now, coaching and not coaching, coaching 2 different teams, whatever, things like that, and they are hurting for fields for this area. They would love to have more fields, and they are a source of revenue. It costs
And I
use
can
that
tell
field.
you, the committee
Mhm.
that worked on this plan followed a pretty good methodology.
I don't doubt it.
And they solicited community input and such, and they've gone and drawn conclusions and made proposals. Maybe, you have some questions here, and I see it's kind of outside the scope of the committee's work, so maybe we'll give you a chance to ask a specific question or two of Mr. Nanny or, Mr. D'Amelia's here, right? But we're gonna get to a point where
Fisher
our
Cutler.
choices with this would be to say, do we want to amend it and take action, or do we want to try and take action on the plan as it's been submitted to us? And so I'm open to figuring out what we're gonna do, because it's gonna be the collective decision of the planning commission here as to how to process this.
May I offer or attempt to offer some clarification? The way I can best explain the document, to my understanding, is that the document's purpose is to provide a broad spectrum of potential. And it's basically to open the door to a multitude of funding opportunities that might be out there that could pertain to all kinds of different things. And then once the funding is available, at that point, it would be discussed what's going to happen with it. So the purpose of the document isn't to clearly lay out, we're going to have a swimming pool, we're going to have a
Right.
baseball field, it's not to deal with any of the details, it's simply to provide an opportunity for.
I understand, I'm taking this, I'm not just taking this from an advocate for motorcycles, okay? I'm a motorcycle rider, there's a few other people in this room that I know partake in that sport, that recreation activity as well. It also, you've got to look at it from a risk management aspect with regards to the township. The township is going to be reading this document as well. And if all of a sudden there's discussion that, hey, guess what, we want to put up a trail that they're going to allow motorcycles to go up and down. If it wasn't mentioned in here initially, guess what you're going to have now? You're going to have a whole bunch of people in this room filled with people coming, you say, whoa, this was never even mentioned. We listed a whole bunch of potential things, and that was never even, there was never even a breath of mentioning that. So it's also from the aspect, I'll look at it from both sides. So it helps us as well as, so I'm requesting that we just put something in there that talks about motorized usage. It can be very vague, but also just something along those lines. So,
I think to do that, you need to make a specific motion, we'll put it to a vote.
I think Mr. D'Amelia wanted to.
Yeah, I'm Jim D'Amelia, I was on the committee also. In formulating these goals and plans, I think what the committee did was look very carefully at the various inputs, not only Flag Day, but inputs from as far back as 15, 16 years ago, where we had similar surveys. We didn't see a lot of evidence of the type of activities that you're referring to from the public input, either motorized areas or athletic fields. And so what we try to do is reflect the public's input in formulating the goals. Again, that's not to say that these things cannot be added later, but they weren't evident in the data that we had when we formulated the plans.
And I'll say that 15-plus years ago, I mean, I know I have friends of similar age here that will tell me about how they used to just ride their dirt bike right down 6 Mile Road here on the rear tire as fast as they could go. And, you know, it was part of being a kid, it was part of living. We had a gentleman stand up here earlier and discuss about motorcycles going here and there and not wanting to listen to them. What better reason to make dedicated areas that is up to the people to vote or to approve or disapprove that would allow motorsports usage? So, I mean, you know, and times change. I mean, when I was a kid, I'll tell you guys, if I had trouble with people, when people had trouble with me, they came over and knocked on my door. I'd go up to my neighbor, I'd knock on their door and say, listen, I have a motorcycle, and I love riding up in that apple orchard, and I have permission to ride there. Would you allow me to have permission to cut through your cornfield? And I'll stay on the perimeter, I won't try not to run over any corn stalks, I'll stay at the deer pass and everything like that, and they'd say, yeah, go ahead. But times have changed and different from that. So if we look at 15, 20 years ago,
No, I'm just saying.
it's a good way of saying, yeah, that's even more of a reason why it should be considered, because it is completely different. It's a different world.
My point by saying, like, we looked at various other years of input, was that it was fairly consistent from the various surveys, from the past to the one done 2-3 years ago and to the one that was done at Flag Day. It was fairly consistent, and there was no groundswell of public input for athletic fields or mechanized trails. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't think it was ever the intent of the committee either to touch on every possible activity that could occur within the township for all of our residents. For instance, I'd like a dog park, you know, where I can walk and I can walk my dogs. We didn't include that. We met the criteria that this DNR was asking us to do in this information, and this is basically, call it our starting point. I can think of a lot of other things that the residents may want to include sometime in the future in our Parks and Rec, and I don't think it's a possibility right now today for us to state every single activity and
broad
think
brush.
in terms of it being excluded in the future. And I don't think that was ever the intent.
I don't believe it was either. I don't believe it was either. Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments? We get quiet for a little bit, and we think, and then we get up and going, but maybe now we've said our piece related to this one. Does somebody have a motion to make?
Yeah, I'd just like, yes.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that some statements be put in there that talk about potential usage that would be for motorized vehicles.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Lewandowski seconds.
Mr. Khan?
Yes.
Mr. Lewandowski?
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd?
No.
Ms. McLaughlin? No. Ms. Kelly?
No.
Ms. Petrowski?
No.
Motion fails.
2 to 4 vote. Motion failed.
Is there
Okay, no, it's just
a different motion
discussion.
related to the disposition of this plan? Someone want to make it, or?
Can I ask the commission a question?
Pardon?
Commissioner,
Yes.
Can I ask, can you think of a statement that would be acceptable, or a motion that would be acceptable to place in there that somehow touched on motorized vehicles? And then if the answer to that is no, then I'd like to ask each one of you why there was a no vote to just including it.
Well, I
I can answer that. Honestly, I don't think now is the time to be making changes. This all happened months ago.
I understand.
And, you know, there were many, many opportunities along the way to tweak it. And at this point, we have a very good document. It's done. And what's appropriate to happen right now, in my opinion, is to move it forward.
It just looks odd in my eyes, that like snowmobiles, you got snowmobile trails. You know, people, I know they ride them up and down Curtis Road. I said, well, it'd be nice to have a place to have that, to take them instead of up and down a main road. To throw it out and say, well, that's, you know, maybe 5 years from now we could bring it in. If you don't put it in now, as basic verbiage of the thing, to consider it, it doesn't mean it has to be there, but it could be considered.
Well, there are a multitude of things that could be
But the
considered.
horses, you know, like he said though about horses, I mean, there are a lot of horse farms around here, a lot of riding goes on around here. Now you think, well, geez, now we gotta give them a trail to boot. You know, I have no problem with that.
It's also legal to ride a horse down a public street, but it's not legal to ride a motorized vehicle, you know, a recreational vehicle
That's
down the
true,
street.
that's true, but people still do it though.
Mr. Nanick, guys, what's the next major timing milestone with getting this plan in regards to getting the next cycle of funding, being applicable to the next cycle of funding? What's the date that we're up against for that?
The plan needs to be in the hands of the state no later really than the end of January.
Okay.
It has to be adopted by the board before that, and of course we need time to get
So
it.
we're
We don't want to be coming in right at the end of that process. Earlier is better than later in terms of being able to get an answer back from the state with the potential to be able to, if the township wants to pursue a project.
When's the next timing date after that, after January?
It's once a year.
Okay.
Now, the plan can be amended, just as in any document. The township can go through an amendment process and change it, and submit the change to the state for future. So as was mentioned, this is nothing that's cast in stone. And the process to amend it is a lot easier than the process to amend the master plan under our state planning act. It's basically what you're seeing, a public hearing process, a display period, and adoption by the board. So you know, there is always the potential to add that in. And as I said, nothing, even if that language was not included, nothing prevents the township board from choosing, if they find it's an appropriate priority, choosing to develop a snowmobile trail using township funds.
Would the commission be in favor of doing an amendment further on down the road that included something like that? That at least mentioned it, just so it wasn't a shock to the township if ever anything were to come up?
Personally, I'd be open to the idea of any types of amendments, you know, based on what the community needs or wants at any given moment.
Yeah, I have no problem with having something eventually in there, you know, it makes sense. I think that the committee did a really great job with this. You know, there's a wealth of information about the township in here, it's a great reference. And they met the guidelines, it's good, we can get that in, get that going, and then, you know, add things, what you said.
Again, the purpose of the document is just to open the door, you know, to possibilities, all kinds of things.
Yeah, personally, having been through this in some detail, I will tell you that the goal, you know, you get a lot of input from different people, and when I look at the way the goals were developed in the plan, it came across as it's not a plan to do absolutely everything that anybody suggests in a let's call it a minority position, but rather it was the method that was used looked at what the let's call it the popular themes that were shared amongst the residents of the township. And so, I don't feel it does justice to the plan and the work of the committee to allow a singular voice for motorizing the trails to change the work that's been going on for 9 months. And so my personal feeling is the plan needs to stand on its own merits and be judged that way by this commission, and that's what I'd like to do. Yes?
I have a procedural question, Mr. Shepherd. It's my understanding the purpose of a public hearing is so that the public, as well as the other commissioners, see for the first time this plan that you referenced that's been in the work for 9 months. I haven't missed a planning commission meeting this year, and this is the first time it's been available for my review and consideration. And I think that you should hear Mr. Khan's voice. I'm not saying you should agree with him, but this is the absolute appropriate time at a public hearing to make changes. That really, as I understand it, is its purpose, much as you did when you had your zoning ordinance at a public hearing. There were potentially comments that you would consider and decide whether to incorporate them or not. But I think to tell Bart that this is not the appropriate time, I think that that flies in the face of everything I understand about the Michigan Enabling and Planning Act and public hearings. Thank you.
Okay, but I won't get into a debate, but I will say that we did not tell him this is not the appropriate time, but we have rather, as a group of commissioners, we are having a discussion and is tending to indicate that he's in the minority opinion here as to what his personal change would be. And he made a motion and it failed. And he had the right to make that motion, so and we allowed him to do it.
Mr. Nader, would making...
Just to correct the record, Ms. Hamilton.
If any motion were to be made that said to make a change, that said, and was voted yes, to make a change to this, would that affect the time that this could be implemented? If a change were being made tonight, voted on and said, yes, we should implement this change, would that affect the availability date to submit this to Michigan?
In terms of the process going from here, after tonight, if the planning commission recommends this plan to go forward to the board, we basically have 2 board meetings, potential board meetings where the board could consider it, either their December meeting or their January meeting. Either one, if they chose to adopt it at either of those meetings, would fit within the state's schedule. The December meeting would be better, simply because it gives more time to get an answer back from the state before we crunch up against the deadline. So any changes that the planning commission makes tonight as part of their motion, yes, could be incorporated in this. If they're fairly simple changes that don't take a lot of research or don't take a lot of further discussion, for example, sending the planning back to the committee for discussion on a policy change, then I'd say it wouldn't affect the deadlines. A significant policy shift from what's in the plan may be something that would require, or the planning commission would want to have additional input from the committee before moving ahead, and that would affect the timing of things.
So I'll take that as a no. It would not affect the timing. So it would not affect the timing.
I want us to move in one direction or another. So I'm going to make a motion that we send the Parks, Recreation, Open Space Plan forward to the Township Board with a recommendation to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Petrosky has a second. Do we need a voice vote?
No, we'll do a roll call vote, just again, we'll do a roll call vote.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Shepherd?
Yes.
Do we open for comment after the second?
What was
Is
the
that,
question?
I mean, after we have the second, we open for comment?
There should be a period of opportunity for discussion on the motion, yes.
I have no problem with the motion, and I have no problem with voting yes to the motion, because the planning commission here has indicated that they'd be open to amendments, changes further on down the road. And I do not believe at this point is because they are against any motorized parks, motorized usage parks.
Okay.
Fini.
Mr. Shepherd?
Yeah.
Yes. Ms. Petrowski?
Yes.
Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Khan?
Yes.
Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Lewandowski?
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion
Motion
passes.
passed.
Okay. Now, the agenda I have says the next business item is 13007, which is a preliminary site plan review for an improvement to the Fox Hills Learning Center. And I have to get out my site plan review notes here, but it would seem like, why don't we start off with Ms. Krebs, and why don't you detail for us what the application is, just briefly, and then we'll have the experts.
Well, Fox Hills is requesting to enlarge their learning center in the process and have it in a different location on their site. I did pass the plan on to the planner, to the engineer, and also to the fire department. In discussion with the fire department, a lot of their issues that they're going to have will come during the construction phase of the project, not the footprint of the building and the
Not
location
related
of
to
the
site
property.
plan review.
So
Okay.
right now, I would say that their report will do during the construction process. It's a larger building. We've had a preliminary meeting on it, and so everything is ready to go for preliminary site plan approval.
Is there a representative here from Fox Hills that would like to speak to the proposal?
Well, this is a new learning center building. It'll have 6 bays, they can, with an instructor. So that'd be the maximum amount of people using that particular facility, other than the short game area, which is outside with some putting greens and so on to pick up. So that, along with some conference areas, it's a comprehensive swing analysis, cameras, high-tech equipment and so on to analyze the swing and help people improve. So that's really the purpose of the building.
Okay, and it's the building and some grounds improvements, right, so for practice greens and then also some flood.
Yes, they'll be shooting out to the existing driving range, for targets and so on. There'll be some change in the topographical site on the one side, and this is all within outside the easements and so on, so we're not encroaching. It's,
Okay. Yeah, I've seen the details, and they're pretty good, comprehensive set of plans. Okay, so I think we understand what they're proposing, and we had a report from the engineer and also from the planning consultant. Would you care to speak, Mr. Pennington?
Very briefly, I would. Thank you. As with the previous project with the applicant, which you approved some time ago, we had the opportunity to sit down, go over all the plans, go through the procedures and all aspects of what they had to do to come before the planning commission. And at this time, I believe that they have been successful. They have presented the appropriate information for the planning commission to go ahead and review this as a preliminary site plan. I have made some comments on the second page of my report, looking at general things such as I believe that they are in compliance with the overall conditional use for the property, which they did receive from the township some time ago. I believe they're also in compliance with the applicable zoning regulations and procedures as outlined in the township zoning ordinance. And what they want to do is actually I believe, in compliance with their overall strategy for the site. As we know, this is a comprehensive golf facility. They offer several kinds of activities and deal with several public and groups and things of that nature. So this facility, I believe, would fit from a planning perspective within their overall concept. The building location appears to meet all the requirements. The 3 5,000 square foot putting greens, again, supports that kind of overall concept. The parking that's required should be adequate, as it's shown on the plan. The existing parking, as I say, should be adequate. They're adding some pedestrian paths, which will complement access from the clubhouse to the parking area and then to the learning center. The amount of site disturbance should be minimal. Of course, the township engineer would talk about that, because part of this project is accepting this new facility, the runoff calculations, the way that the forebay is going to be constructed, things of that nature would be handled by the township engineer and applicable government agencies, in this case, the Drain Commission. So looking at all of those things, I believe that the concept is from a planning perspective, is acceptable. I would ask about a couple things. One is if there's any additional lighting. I always ask that question on the building, you know, because it is closer to the highway, closer to the entranceway, and I don't know if your practice greens or anything else are going to have lighting. I don't think we discussed that when we were meeting, and I didn't see any representation on the plans.
Well, as much as this is a preliminary, we don't have the lighting on that. That will
Okay.
be in the.
That's right, preliminary does not need that. I did make another comment, because the building is not that close to the road, neither are the practice greens, but when you go down Territorial Road, there is a line of trees, and there's kind of an increase in topographical elevation. It does provide some reasonable screening and buffering. You can't really look into that area. So whatever activities are being proposed should be adequately screened and buffered. So based upon my assessment, from a planning perspective, I believe it's ready for your review and for your action. Any other comments? I'll gladly respond.
Thank you. We also have a letter from the Stantec Township Engineers.
And Mr. Brian Simons, Township Engineer, reviewed the plans, and his last comment probably is the most telling. Based on the above review comments, the plan meets the preliminary site plan requirements from an engineering perspective. Obviously, the drainage and a lot more other issues will come in the final site plan process.
Okay, all right. And I'll just add for everyone's information here, when we go into the zoning ordinance in Article 64, the current zoning ordinance, which has the rules on site plan review, when it says standards for review, I'm not going to read the 11 standards, but there are 11 comprehensive standards that need to be met. And we rely on Ms. Cripps and Mr. Pennington and the engineers to assure us that that's been the case. And I can't speak for the other commissioners, but I've done my own cross-check, and I believe that all elements have been handled well. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the Planning Commission related to this application? Would someone like to make a motion?
Make a motion that we approve preliminary plan. What do we call this? The
Preliminary site plan review?
No. What do we call this building?
Learning center.
A learning center for
Learning
Fox Hills?
center.
Second.
Is there a second?
Yes, second would be nice.
Okay.
Mr. Khan?
Yes.
Mr. Lewandowski?
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd?
Yes.
Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Petrowski?
Yes.
Motion passes, and we
Thank you.
provided preliminary site plan approval.
All the fun stuff.
Okay. Now, because I'm running off an old agenda, I think we're now at item 8, old business items. And do we have, we have any more? We do? Okay, yeah, and item 8 is the Board of Trustees assignment related to the draft zoning ordinance changes requested by Attorney Fisher. So, what I'd like to start with, Ms. McLaughlin, could you just give us the 60-second summary of what the board discussion was related to the zoning ordinance and what the planning commission's supposed to do here?
Okay.
You might comment?
Well, yeah, when it was coming to the board, it was realized that the changes that were made by the attorneys weren't really highlighted in the online zoning ordinance that was being proposed, so we really couldn't tell what had been put in by the attorneys and what changes we as the zoning board had made. So this was put together to specify all the changes that were made. So the township board didn't feel comfortable with passing it when all of these changes were made that were not reviewed by this board. So we wanted to send it back one more time so that we could all, in the planning commission, look at it, understand the changes that were made, see if we agreed with it.
Okay. So I think the way we should interpret that assignment is the planning commission, right now, the zoning ordinances was sent to the township board with a recommendation to approve it. There's been a number of changes made, and I think that what we should do is have the discussion with the experts and such, and in light of some of the public comment that was made, the planning commission should see if we can reach a conclusion as to whether we would like to recommend, to continue our recommendation to the board with the revised text, or perhaps make some changes and send a revised text from what's been supplied to us to the board with a recommendation to approve. Or we could say we have insufficient information to complete that action this evening, and we have things to study further, perhaps. So I don't know, but what I would like to do is have a simple summary of the changes that were made, and then open it up to discussion from the planning commission members, if you're amenable to that. Okay, so Mr. Nanny prepared the 6-page report? Okay. I think there are extra copies available.
Yes, I have extra copies.
So if someone hasn't seen the summary of the changes that were made, because I'll tell you that there's an awful lot of changes, and there's a few that out of, what's probably 60 changes, there's probably 5 that deserve people's attention.
Don, you got another copy?
So we'll just relax for a moment and let people get copies. I will tell you that I read through the entire, all these changes, by the way, are in the text that's up on the township website. Okay? At this time. So, and then this is now a synopsis of the changes that were made. So, what else can you tell us about the changes, Mr. Nate?
Well, I can tell you that I certainly can see where the confusion had occurred with regards to the version that was up on the township website, because, well, all we did was essentially replace the pages that needed to be replaced. And so the other sections, which did have some strike through and underline where the planning commission had recommended changes along the way, that July draft still retained those strike through and underline. We simply changed the draft date at the top for the pages that we were altering and showed the changes on that one in the new version. That's been our process all the way through. Each new draft, we show the changes from the previous draft only. But when the whole document was put together on the website, it created confusion because it made it look like some of the commission's changes from back in July were part of what the lawyer had been working on. So that's why we prepared this summary. And as was noted, basically there are many changes that are really just technical. Professor Fisher had some preferences related to wording that usually added a few words to definitions, but didn't change the effect. There are a few cases, like the definition of nuisance, where he wanted us, rather than having a specific definition in the document, to simply refer to Michigan law. In that, I mean, it's a legal issue, and he said that certainly that the definition of nuisance can change as case law precedents is developed in the future. Our goal with this document has always been to create a document that everything that's needed is here. And so that's why we included a specific definition of nuisance based on the case law that exists today. But his recommendation was to replace that with the reference, and so we did. There are a few cases like that where he said reference state law. As the chair mentioned, there are basically 5 sections that had some additional change, maybe beyond simply the technical. And so I'd like to highlight those. The first one's on page 4, section 40.410, secondhand stores. He asked us to delete some of the use standards that Professor Fisher felt were better placed in a separate regulatory ordinance if the township wanted to adopt an ordinance for secondhand stores. So based on his recommendation, we did take those out and added a reference to state law related to that, because there is a state law that governs secondhand stores as well. The second item, section 40.504, also on page 4, self-storage warehouses. His recommendation was to add, basically to add the option for the planning commission to be able to approve a self-storage warehouse facility that's not on a primary road. It doesn't have a significant effect because the zoning districts where these are allowed are, all the road frontages are primary roads as far as the county is concerned. But he asked for that option. The next was actually the next item down on this list, 40.603, extraction operations. This was significant change, only that we were adding in language from a recent change to state law. It was actually a change that I was aware of, but we didn't want to put in here because, quite frankly, the law is horrendous. The law actually refers to a Michigan court, I think it's Court of Appeals decision, if I recall correctly, that was overturned, and then basically the legislature decided to reinstate it, and they reinstated it by simply referring to that decision. So in order to find out what the rules really are, you have to do a LexisNexis search for that court decision. But that's how the law was worded, and he asked that we put that wording into this ordinance. And so you'll see in that section, the new wording goes along with what the state law says. And what it did is it made it easier for people to be able to get extraction operations approved. That's essentially what the state law did, was to ease restrictions from the local zoning level. And so that's why you see in that section, it talks about finding of no serious consequences. That's the language from the state act that was based on that court decision. The next item on the list is on page 5 of our report, near the top, and it's probably, in my mind, the most significant change, and I know there's already been discussion of it tonight, and that's section 60.02K, noise. This is part of the performance standards. Noise, odor, surface water flow, basic statements, most of them referencing the state environmental laws. in compliance with those the state laws that apply. The current township zoning ordinance has detailed noise provisions, and what you see in what we tucked back into the ordinance at Professor Fisher's recommendation is actually based on the current ordinance. We updated it a bit to make it a little easier to work with, but Professor Fisher felt that the general statement in this subsection K, specifically the statement, the noise which is objectionable due to volume, frequency, or beat, he felt was too subjective. And in that, he is correct, it is a subjective statement. The intent here was the discussion that was had in terms of as we developed this ordinance, this goes back now a couple of years, I think, was actually that the township did not want to have the detailed standard that's in the current ordinance. And that's why we moved to this general statement. Typically, noise is addressed in detail in a separate regulatory ordinance. It'd be a separate ordinance adopted by the township board that applies generally across the community. And so our proposal to just include a general statement here fit with that character, in that a general regulatory ordinance of the township could be developed or amended to address noise in detail if there was a desire to do that. But Professor Fisher felt that this standard was not sufficient, was too subjective, and he requested that specific standards be inserted. And so we did that based on what the current ordinance requires. The one thing we changed from the current ordinance has a table similar to the table we have, but this table has various tight frequency bands. It has separate decibel levels for each one, has separate decibel levels between different types of land uses. And so it actually is a very complicated section to enforce. And we boiled that down into an average for each of those that met that basically followed along the average standards across the bottom of the table. We also added some additional exceptions beyond what the current ordinance exempts. There was just talking about this before I get into our recommendation with regards to this. One other thing, really, the current ordinance and this proposed one, there was a question about farming operations and emergency circumstances like we have right now with the need for generator power. And both of those are actually addressed. They're addressed in the current regulation. They're also addressed in the proposed one. Right at the beginning of this section, section 60.02, performance standards, there's a clear statement that says the provisions shall not apply to farming equipment or emergency circumstances. So we do cover the ground that was raised tonight with regard to that, and then, as I said, added additional exceptions.
Yes.
The one thing I will say about noise is that I don't often disagree with the township attorney. Like I said, but in this case, my suggestion, I included at the end of my report, our suggestion is to address that if there is an interest in regulating noise at a detailed level in the township, that really should be addressed as a separate regulatory ordinance. And that for purpose of this ordinance, that we would recommend that the original language the planning commission put forward, the general statement, be recommended forward to the board. And that, as I said, if desired, that the recommendation can be added for the board to consider a separate noise ordinance if they wish to do that.
Okay.
Those are main items. The only other item was related to wetlands, and it was again a desired change by the attorney to add some flexibility there.
Did you mention what the change to 60.08 was?
60.08, that's the last one, wetlands and water courses. The change was, the current ordinance, what's proposed follows the current ordinance, which requires a 50-foot setback from the edge of a wetland. So 50-foot buffer area. The Professor Fisher felt that may not be enforceable in every circumstance. He said that 25 feet, and we had this discussion when we were working on this section, 25 feet has generally been upheld in court actions. And his suggestion was to simply add language to there, giving the planning commission the ability to approve a reduced setback where specific circumstances warranted, and so we didn't include that language in there.
Okay. I think we should get to the heart of the matter, which is we ought to raise any questions we have related to section 60.02K and noise. I know I have a couple, but I don't necessarily need to go first. Right?
I just really wanted clarification based on the concerns that were voiced earlier. And you did point out that in this page that I have, it says exemptions, the provision of this article shall not apply to farming equipment. You had said that, I missed what you said in regard to emergency situations. Did you say that that is also addressed somewhere?
What we did, this noise piece is a subsection of what's called performance standards, which is section 60.02. And right at the top of that section 60.02, it's the first page of Article 60. There's a statement there that says the provisions of this subsection shall not apply to farming equipment or emergency circumstances. So the entire, all of the standards, water flow, odor, all of them, are farm equipment and emergency circumstances are exempted. Sure.
Okay.
You think you want to include something like temporary construction? I mean, a guy running a jackhammer putting, busting up some concrete.
Yeah, there's language in here talking about timing of construction activity on the page 60-3, and setting a limitation between 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. Monday through Saturday and all day Sunday and holidays. So it basically does, it creates a limit, but it's a limit during those nighttime hours.
I've got a question. And when you talk about the, let's say we go to the general commercial area or the general industrial area, and you have a sound limit, you have two industrial lots adjacent to one another, so industrial and industrial into each other. The limit's going to be, what, 64 dB? I mean, based on this chart.
The current,
right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is the current zoning ordinance. I take it this is replicated in the revision that was put up.
Right, we carried it over. We did make some changes to it, but the numbers are essentially carried over.
Okay, so what I'm curious about is, so you have industrial property where we say it's okay if you're adjacent to industrial property, 64 dB, okay? But what about the guy 4 lots down that happens to be the residential use in a residential district? Is the separation in space enough there that what passes for 64 here in industrial is going to be attenuated to 55 by the time it gets to the residential district?
That's a great question, and that's the real issue with noise regulations, is that atmospheric conditions, topography, there's all kinds of factors that can affect how loud things are and where they're loud.
Oh, I know, because we have guys in a portion of the general industrial district that are doing, terraforming and extraction type operations.
Right.
And the residents that live nearby complain about the noise on weekends.
I had a circumstance where we lived for quite a while near the EMU campus, and EMU had some loudspeakers by their new student center. And they occasionally did events out there, and they had the speakers out, and they would obviously mic the people and such. And in the neighborhood, near the campus, about a mile from that building and from those speakers, there was a point where, for whatever reason, the focus of the speakers, whatever it was as if you were standing next to them. It was so loud, but if you walked 50 feet in either direction, you couldn't hear it at all. And it was just the conditions, topography, whatever it was focusing the sound. At that place, a mile away, it was far louder than probably 300 feet away. And that's one of the reasons why we would recommend a general regulatory ordinance for this, where we have a set of standards apply across the township. This is the maximum period, rather than standards based on district or based on one land use to another. Because we do have so many odd combinations of things, and because we do have significant topography that can create circumstances where it will be far louder a mile away than it is a quarter of a mile away from the noise source. The table is very detailed, and it's based on scientific study, certainly, but I think in terms of, for the township, it would be better to do it as a general regulation rather than in some
You know, to me, it seems like if you have a non-specific requirement, which is where we were, right? Noise, which is objectionable due to volume, frequency, or beat, shall be muffled or otherwise controlled, so it's and that's like, that's great from the perspective of the person who wants to be protected from noise, but it's not a very good situation for the person who wants to know where's the limit on what's acceptable, right? Because you want to put a use on an industrial property, and you want to know how to say, this is what I'm entitled to do. And if you have a non-specific call out here, right? And then in the absence of a township noise ordinance, it's subjective, and subjectivity leads to a lack of enforcement, and it's just, you end up with just differences of opinion.
But certainly, if one option could be here to simply add the statement that says all land uses shall comply with township noise regulations. And that way, if the township adopts or updates a regulatory ordinance for noise, then they would apply. But as I said, it would just, I think it would be, in this case, it would be better to have that regulation in a separate ordinance rather than part of it.
What are the rules for passing a township ordinance? What's the procedure there?
Well, they're adopted by the township board. It's not something that comes to the planning commission. So the board would they can.
It's legislative action by the township board. Is there a requirement for public hearings or any of that, or is it an expeditious process if they choose to do it?
Well, the board has to make it part of their public meeting. They have to do the publications that are associated with that. There's a longer period of time after they adopt it before it becomes effective than the zoning ordinance. Typically, it's 30 days after adoption. But the process is a board process rather than one coming to the planning commission first.
And what's typical in most, not most, what's typical in townships that are kind of similar to Salem? To have a separate noise ordinance, or to integrate it into the zoning ordinance, or just not worry?
Some have it in their zoning ordinance, some have it in a separate regulatory ordinance. And often, if it's included in the zoning, it's because the township does not have a lot of regulatory ordinances. They want all their standards to be in one document, essentially. And so they just tuck it into the zoning ordinance.
Who else has questions?
I'm for the idea of a separate.
Pardon?
Not a question, I'm for the idea, I'm for going with the separate.
A separate noise.
I agree with what
It's just-
Mr. Nanny suggested, because, our community is unique. There are a lot of working people here, and I don't think that it should be up to us to define what the noise level should or should not be like. If it's an issue, then the board can create that at a later time.
Any other thoughts here? Ms. Petrosky?
If the township does not adopt a noise ordinance separately from this, what rules apply then? Are we just a free freewheeling community and you could do anything you want, make as much noise as you want, or, I mean, what I'm saying is, you know,
You still have the criminal processes related to disturbing the peace. I mean, it would include it in the sheriff's department or state police can still enforce those issues and as they come up. And it would be something that would be enforced by the police rather than by the ordinance officer.
I have a question for Ms. Crooks. You may not have the answer, but I'm just curious, you know, because we've had this detailed ordinance for many years, right, 10 years probably.
It was 2001.
Have we had noise complaints that have taken people to go through the process of measuring this?
Not to that level. I've had complaints about people firing guns off, but that there is a state law that governs where you can fire that gun off. I haven't, personally, I have not had any. My predecessors may have, but I haven't. And I'm not sure just firing a gun off now and then would do it. I think you'd have to do target practice. You'd have to be out there shooting constantly.
Yeah, you know, because I lack the detailed information, but I don't believe there's a current noise problem in the township, even with this detailed set of regulations and the current exclusions for the farm equipment in emergency situations. And so I'm sitting here personally having, I'm in a dilemma that I kind of led to, which is to have something that's subjective and could be interpreted far more severely than this by the people that are administering this, right? Where you get into protracted fights, you really have a nuisance, because I don't know that this is sufficient to stop a nuisance complaint. Okay. And it would seem to me that the people that are generating noise would be better served to have specific, you know, provable and measurable conditions than to be subject to something that's vague. And you know, I'm not the attorney.
And I don't know, it's maybe just with just a general statement on the noise, and if the township board does not pass a more comprehensive noise ordinance, then a business could operate on a Sunday and have complaints with a lot of activity going on and that noise level on a Sunday or a holiday. I'm sure there's not any, you know, they could operate 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
There wouldn't be those time limits under the general comment if the board, unless the board passes a more comprehensive noise ordinance.
Right, so.
So there would be that issue.
And so I see the question is are we punting the problem to the board in hoping that they'll do it? Or is it something we should stand up and do? Or do we have a firm opinion that what was originally written in Article 60K, which is the kind of vague subjective thing, is the right way to go in the zoning ordinance? And you know, it's a matter of deliberation. Now, I know Mr. Quigley wanted to offer some comment here.
It just was a comment that went along with what Mr. Gribb said, that when you reduce it from there, and there isn't another one, your police officer isn't going to have anything to operate under either. So he's not going to be able to go out and say, as on occasion has happened to the neighbor, you know, cool, you know, we don't like it, we got this thing, you gotta be more courteous to your neighbors, et cetera, whatever he, you know, does to ameliorate the situation. If you don't have something down in that ordinance, that's always been a problem. From when I was on the planning commission some 8 years ago, we went through the same business in defining numbers and things. I don't know if they changed after that. Mr. Pennington would know. But we went through that for quite a period to sort of define the areas where these things could happen, and take noise, more noise could be tolerated, et cetera. And we give it quite a bit of consideration in that past one that you were looking at. And because we didn't have one at the township level, and the succeeding boards have not, including the one I served on, did not get around to making a new noise ordinance standalone. So if it isn't there, it's not there. That's,
I think that the purpose of our ordinances are to protect the quality of life of our residents. And if we don't have any specific guidelines regarding noise, I'm just not sure that we're taking their quality of life into consideration. And again, being general in this, we talked about a fireworks ordinance 2 years ago or something, and that's not come to fruition. And I'm not sure if we wouldn't experience the same thing as Mr. Quigley said. Through many boards, we've never come to a noise ordinance definitive addition here from our Board of Trustees. And I just think to leave it very general and not defined, I know for me, because I have someone right close to me that shoots all the time, and I have to go into the house or go far away from where they're shooting because they're not quite accurate with their shooting experience. So I guess I don't like to leave things.
Not quite accurate?
Well, when a bullet ends up in the back of my house, I would say that's not quite accurate. So.
Well, that's different other than noise.
Well,
I'd
but
certainly be
again,
addressing that. Holy
like I
smokes.
say, when there's the sounds of things going through the trees and hitting the leaves and all of that, that makes it, and that affects my quality of life. And I'm not using shooting as a specific example here, but what I'm saying is I think that a noise ordinance protects our residents, and I'm just concerned that if we're real general here, I don't.
Yes, Ms. Hamilton.
First of all, I respectfully disagree with Mr. Quigley. I believe the township does have a noise or nuisance ordinance that was adopted under Mr. O'Purdy. And it does deal with the very issues that you're discussing. The issue with what you have before you, it's so restricted. 50 decibels at the property line is louder than an average conversation. It's fatally flawed, the numbers you have before you. It does not allow for things that people do on their property routinely for enjoyment.
A lawnmower or weed whacker would set it off. I'm talking at 25 decibels.
Lawnmower is exempt if you read it.
But a whisper in a quiet room is 25 dBA.
But there's a lot of people that run chainsaws not because they're taking down the trees from last night's storm. They just periodically cut wood. Maybe they have a fireplace, maybe they heat with wood. There are issues with what you have, and I do believe the township, because Mr. O'Purdy brought forward under his first term, he brought forward a policy that criminalized noise. And it said that if they could give tickets that could result in misdemeanors. And I was on the board at the time, and the board voted not to adopt that because we didn't want to criminalize noise. When you put a misdemeanor on someone's record, people go to court because they don't want that misdemeanor. And so the board adopted something that's a civil infraction. Now, it's not my job to come here tonight with something that the board did 5, 6, 8 years ago and tell you that and have it in hand. If I'd known that was where we were going, I would have looked it up. But the township does have an ordinance that I believe deals exactly with your concerns. And again, if you're going to keep what we have here, it's too restrictive. And people cannot enjoy their properties, can't do anything, because as Bart said, anything above a whisper, at the property line, you're simply going to sick one neighbor on the other. It will be used as a tool for retaliation, the way it's written.
I know this may seem kind of contradictory because of where I'm sitting and, you know, what this whole meeting is about and what we discuss a lot, but I'll tell you, one of the things that attracted me to Salem Township specifically, I mean, my wife and I looked around, we first said, okay, in this area, we were moving from the opposite side of the state. And we first started with, I think we want to live west of Woodward. And after about 1 or 2 weekends looking out here, we said, oh my gosh, we definitely want to live west of Woodward. Heck, we want to be west of 275. And then we got down to a bunch of counties, and we said, you know, I think we really want to be in Washtenaw County. And when it came down to it, we said, you know, we really want to be in Salem Township. And one of the things about it is the way the neighbors are, the way the people are. And you know what? If we have to adopt a law that goes down to the nth level of every little nitty-gritty for everything that we do, for the way we breathe, for the way we speak, for the way we blink, we have to do more than just, paperwork isn't gonna cover it. We have to examine ourselves. You know, if I have a problem, if I have a problem with my neighbor, with anything they're doing, be it noise, be it light, be it, you know, do we have to have an olfactory ordinance if we happen to be smelling their horse excrements, you know, across the property line? You know, I'll go up and knock on their door and talk to them and say, hey, you know what, neighbor? This is bothering me, can we discuss this? And go from there. But we can't rely on a book that's gonna ever grow thicker and bigger and have smaller font and more asterisks every time you wanna do something. We're human beings first.
Okay,
Go from
so
there.
I just want to offer up something here that Ms. Cripps brought to my attention, which is Salem Township Ordinance 2003-03-2501, which I guess is still a valid ordinance. And it was published on April 3rd, 2003, and it took effect May 3rd, 2003, and I'll just tell you, it says, the intent of this ordinance is to provide the township with an enforceable community nuisance ordinance that acknowledges Salem residents are entitled to enjoy their property free from unreasonably loud, disturbing, or unnecessary noise, and at the same time respect people's right to normal daily activities without unreasonable interference. And it goes on and has definitions and such, and it's 3 simple pages. It does not have the very specific details that are in the current zoning ordinance. I mean, if you want to see it, I mean, it's real simple. But to me, if this is it's new information to me, but if the township has a noise ordinance that's in effect, I'm willing to have a general comment in the zoning ordinance that doesn't contravene that in any way, be what's fair. And then, you know, the people that manage the ordinances need to, if they don't like the existing ordinance, that's board action, right? And they can replace it with something different. But I guess we should be trying to usurp the actions that the board took in 2003.
I actually, Doug, since you started to talk, that is actually on the township website right now. I'm looking at it. So it is there.
But there is no enforcement quality to that or something else.
That's the issue.
Yeah, there is no
Well,
measurable standard.
Wouldn't it be up to the board to determine if there needs to be?
No, it's up to the enforcement officer
It is
and
up
the
to-
board.
It is up to the
Well-
board to determine whether or not the ordinance needs to be changed, to
Right.
add detail.
okay. So I think, you know, I'll just propose what we need to do to get through this. I would propose that we're focusing on the 5 items called out in this, the first page of the 6-page report, the changes that they said we should pay most attention to. 40.410, 4504, 4603, 6002, and 6008. And I think that what we have is we have the zoning ordinance text as modified, that's up on the website, includes all these changes, okay? And what I would like to do is go through these 5 one by one and get a planning commission consensus on whether we're comfortable with the changes that are there. Along, being in the a zoning ordinance we recommend be approved, so that's 5 to go through one at a time, and then we'll have one discussion, is there anything else that we should talk about? Is that a good way to handle it?
Yeah.
Okay, so, we'll do the least controversial first, so we've had this discussion on noise, and I want it to settle for a few minutes, and let's see if we can get through the other 4. So the first question I'll ask is, do we want to accept the changes that were made in section 40.410 and say that those changes are still in line with the recommendation we made to the board to approve? And so, I'll just ask, I think that they're in line with the recommendation we made, but I'd like to hear from each of you, just say yes or no, you agree or don't. You just come down the table. This has gotta be a consensus thing.
I have no problem with it, fine.
Lewandowski's okay, Casey's okay, Bart's okay.
The addition of number 3 makes it acceptable.
40.41, we're okay.
Right.
Okay, so those changes that have been made there, we still recommend, we're not proposing change, okay. The next one is 40.504, which related to self-storage warehouses. And again, I'll start off by saying I'm okay with the change, but because it just gives the planning commission an option on what to approve, rather than restricts us. Casey's okay?
Fine.
All right, so we're good with that one too. All right, extraction operations, which is 4603, where we recognize changes in the state law, and I'm okay with following state law there.
State law, no problem.
Yeah. Are we all okay with that? You Sandy?
603.
I'm just waiting.
Yeah, Bart.
Bart's okay? You okay, Sandy?
Yeah, I'm okay, but limitations seems almost like a,
Pardon?
limitations almost, the addition of limitations, exemptions and limitations almost seems like
All
a-
right.
an inappropriate title for it, because it just expands. It allows a lot of things, but
Okay.
state law states that.
And then 60.08, which was again, it was giving us an option, it gives the planning commission an option to accept 25 feet rather than 50, and I'm okay with that, but again, because I don't have a problem having the option. TJ's okay. How about you, Sandy?
I have an issue with this.
Yeah.
I would rather
Fine.
50.
Are we okay?
Yep.
All right, so we got through those 4, so now we're at the enchilada, right, which is what do we want to do about the noise? And, I would like to propose, and I'd just like to hear from people before we make a motion, but I think I'm comfortable going back to the original text in Article 60, Section 60.02K, in light of, given that we have a township zoning ordinance, or a noise ordinance, given that the planner's recommendation is really to stand pat with the original text here, I'm, quite honestly, I would like to have that be in the text that we recommend that the board approves, which is the original text, which says noise which is objectionable due to volume, frequency, or beat shall be muffled or otherwise controlled And then, of course, in the beginning of the section, there was the clarification that it doesn't apply to farming equipment or emergency circumstances.
That is,
And that because there's an existing
so that doesn't.
noise ordinance, the board certainly has it within their control to do something more specific if they want to.
No.
Okay, what about the 60-4, the page with the chart on it? Are we gonna leave their chart in, or do chart that's currently in the ordinance? Are we going with this chart or this small one?
Neither.
Neither.
There's not currently
This is
Right.
2001.
The only call out was, okay, right?
Yeah, when this document is complete and adopted, whatever is in here then will become the new zone ordinance. What's left over in the other ordinance then will be filed away for posterity.
So that is what I'm saying. Are we, is what's going in is this or this?
Neither one.
Neither
We are-
one's going in
We are
now.
proposing this one and.
The original
Mr.
text only.
Oh, that's what's in here.
No, no, no. The text
I'm with you.
is recommended by the planning
I'm
commission.
confused now completely.
Well, here, actually, if you look on the last page of our
one.
report,
Yeah, 16.
the second paragraph
Yeah,
down on the
yeah,
last
the
page.
section that was
Crossed
stricken.
out.
Yeah.
60-3,
So-
page 50, K, noise,
It just has a paragraph there.
Yeah.
The
It's
paragraph
all
is
crossed
duplicate in our
out.
report.
right here.
Just go back to that original language that was proposed. I think that was the July meeting.
I'm looking at this. I think I'm a document short here.
Do you understand what I suggested there? Casey got it.
We go back to the original before the attorney requested we put in the chart.
So we're going back to.
Which
You
is
know,
the-
I'll let you borrow it. This is what it says. This is right there. That's all it says.
It's all, okay, and that's the same as what's
What's crossed out?
here.
The main, the main-ish, the main one, yes.
All right, so you're in line with the May. And are we okay with the May text down on this end as well? Okay. So, and now I just have to say, I think everything else is okay. And does anybody else have a problem with all the other relatively minor, I mean, myriad? There's a ton of it there. You have a comment, Mr. Heil?
Yeah, I was just gonna, I'm not seeing what you're looking at, but in other areas of the document, you're making references to like state law. If you have, now that you know that you have a standalone regulatory ordinance for noise, why don't you just make a reference to that in this document?
That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
Yeah, why give them a chance to contradict, just reference the other.
Because if you have, if you make the statement like you're planning on it, it sounds like now you're gonna have two different ordinances making two different statements.
And we may not see a conflict in them now, but someone will find one in them later.
Right.
Mr. Shepherd?
That's a good suggestion. The question is if, you know, we have this one ordinance that is the ordinance of today, but when that changes, do you want the zoning ordinance to be out of sync with it?
I think it certainly is a very valid suggestion to simply reference, because that's, in other parts of this particular section of the document, we did the same thing with referencing the state
That
laws
was
that apply.
your original suggestion, correct?
And so we certainly, we could make it a simple one-sentence statement that simply refers to you know, something along the lines of all land uses shall conform to the applicable township noise regulations. Something like that could be
Yeah.
a simple statement.
There you go, simple. Simple.
Mr. Shepherd?
Yes, sir.
One thing, when someone, I represent the industrial, the general industrial, when someone purchases land in a general industrial area, they expect to make more noise than what you would have, let's say, in commercial or the light industry. And and a lot of that noise would be like a grinding operation or a wood operation outside. So I think the noise ordinance is okay, you know, for the 90% of the township, but the general industrial is, that ordinance is awful low for the general industrial people, for the industrial people, not necessarily for commercial or a grocery store or something like that. And a lot of the operations over there, and they came in here to, like I-40 grinds concrete and asphalt. There's 2 or 3 other people that grind there too, and they're gonna make more noise than this ordinance says, even though it might be in violation of the original one, 2001, which we didn't realize was even in existence.
Yes, so then you'd be happy with the fact that we have stricken the chart.
That's good.
It's not, what we're saying is we don't want the zoning ordinance to go to the board with the chart in it,
All right,
okay?
thank you very much.
Now, we've done that, but we haven't finished our discussion and wrapped it up in a motion to recommend, you know, so we have to think about how we're gonna do that. But again, I wanted to just do a quick check to see if there were any other concerns related to the changes that someone had individually here.
No, I looked some of those over again, I'm fine with it.
You okay? Okay, on this end. So now we need someone to make a motion. Let me see if I could, I guess, is somebody quick here, or I'll beat my way through it.
You go for it.
Pardon? You're good. Okay, I'd like to make a motion that the planning commission send the modified zoning ordinance text with the change we just made, with the change to I'm just gotta get the number right. 60.02K, so that it is essentially the May 7th, 2013 text with a reference to the existing township zoning ordinance.
Wasn't that, do you want to include, basically, do you want to include this text and add a reference, or just put the reference in?
Replace with reference?
I would like to include, I would like it to state what's here and reference the existing township noise ordinance.
Okay.
They're not incompatible.
No, they're not incompatible.
Basically, we're adding a sentence to this that refers to the township ordinance.
Yes, so that we have the general statement here, which is in alignment with what's in that ordinance. And then it references the existing ordinance. And that and so I would, you know, my motion is
That's right.
the revised text with the exception of reverting 60.02K to the May 7th text with a simple reference to the existing ordinance. And that we would like to send that,
Back to.
that the planning commission would recommend that the township board
Approve the modification.
approve that version of the zoning ordinance.
The body of the motion will include the exact language. I'll make sure that in the body of the motion, that language will be included.
Yeah.
Okay?
And then second, you see? Okay,
Do we have a second?
Casey. So now we're ready for a roll call vote.
Chairman Shepherd?
Yes.
Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
Darrell Lewandowski?
Yes.
Sandra Petrowski?
Yes.
Art Khan? Mr. Khan?
Once again, can we open up for discussion before we take a vote?
Okay.
I mean, because I understand what you're saying, and I think I agree. But the statement that's in there right now, I mean, let's just read it and look at it for what it is. Noise which is objectionable due to volume, frequency, or beat shall be muffled or otherwise controlled so that there is no production of sound discernible at lot lines in excess of the average intensity of street and traffic noise at the lot lines. Air raid sirens and related apparatus used solely for public purposes are exempt from this requirement. Okay, so you have to have a noise, and you have to have it determined objectionable. And at that point, it's telling you what you should do to prevent that noise. It has to be controlled. It doesn't say you have to stop. It just has to preventative. So it can be muffled or it can be controlled. So I mean, you know, put up a berm, put up whatever. Okay, and that's fine. It's more like, this is more like a preventative measure after the court case, more than an instruction. So to implement this, you have to first have a noise that is deemed objectionable. By whom? I don't know. You know. So does that mean you have to go through the ordinance, be hit with a fine, or the judge says this is objectionable, and then you get to go back and implement this? Or is it?
I don't think so, but.
Well, I mean, I do see these as potentially kind of being a catch-22, chicken and egg, whatever you want to say, because if the judge says, okay, cease and desist, well, you say no, judge, because this says all I have to do is muffle it, and then you can come out again, and we can go through this whole thing again to see if you still determine it objectionable. And once you determine objectionable and it's a noise and it's bothering again, well, then I get to go back and have another shot. And it just looks like a, you know, whirling dervish of paperwork and, you know. So I'm for the statement made a couple minutes ago, which just said strike this, reference the ordinance, and be done. So not even have this, which could add potential conflict. I believe it adds detail, but I think it adds detail that could add more confusion than anything else. It's 51% confusion, 49% help, I believe.
Okay, but we're in the middle of,
I know, I think we kind of hopefully backed up to the discussion before the vote, if that's where we're truly at, so.
An amendment.
okay,
A friendly
you know,
amendment can be made to the motion.
it must be me, because I thought we had that whole discussion.
Well,
So are you saying that you need to have, because I thought you said you didn't want
okay,
any
well,
kind of
okay, this is a zoning
guidelines
ordinance.
for it.
This is in the zoning ordinance, right? So someone says, we're not in compliance with a zoning ordinance. So how do you be not in compliance with noise which is objectionable due to volume, frequency, or beat shall be muffled or otherwise controlled? You are not in compliance because you don't have that noise muffled or otherwise controlled.
What happens is someone will call and make a complaint, it will be investigated, and then we will work with that person to work on getting that noise muffled, turned down, whatever, so that they're in compliance. The only way you're gonna go through to a judge is if the court, if the board of trustees and the
Okay,
attorneys
but-
deem that this is a case that
Let's
needs to
just-
go forward.
Let's get organized here. But we had a lot of discussion, we made a motion, we seconded the motion, and we were gonna take a vote, okay?
Well, you can put amendment to that.
Yes.
Chuck, after motion seconded, there is a period of time that should, for discussion on the motion and for the potential friendly amendments to that motion. So it is appropriate to have the discussion on the motion at this point, and for somebody to propose, if they choose, a friendly amendment. to the
Okay,
motion.
so we're at that point, and now the difficulty I have is we had the discussion halfway through a roll call vote. All right, so I'm in a quandary as to the appropriate thing to do, to start the roll call vote over now that the discussion's done, or,
You know, Mr. Khan can propose an amendment to the motion that was made, and then you would also have to approve that, and Mr. Lewandowski, because you were the initiators and seconders of that particular motion.
If
I
he
think I
chooses.
If he chooses
Okay.
to make an amendment to your motion, it still would have to go to you.
I would
for
like to
you.
make
Casey,
an amendment.
Casey was the second of that motion.
It was Casey, I'm sorry.
That's who I got.
I'm sorry, I had that wrong. Okay, then it would be Casey.
I got Doug and Casey.
Okay, so
Okay.
that tells me
Yeah, I do have
that we need to complete our vote.
Well, before you complete the vote, he's right, that there needed to be discussion of the motion. He was not ready to vote, and so he appropriately raised that
Yeah.
before the vote was completed. So that vote was not completed. In terms of your process, if Mr. Khan wants to raise a friendly amendment, or propose a friendly amendment at this point, he can do that. Otherwise, if you find that nobody has any other discussion, then I would proceed with the vote starting.
All right, I think the right thing to do is provide an opportunity to revise the motion and then restart the vote from the top.
Sounds great.
Okay? Perfect.
But you gotta vote on that.
No, what's your
You
motion?
gotta vote on
No,
it.
part of the discussion is, now, I would like to raise a friendly amendment to that motion, that we do not have the statement that starts noise which is objectionable due to volume and ends in from this requirement, and we just simply reference the noise law, the noise ordinance itself. We just simply say, as part of the zoning ordinance, if you're looking under noise, you go to the ordinance, and just let the ordinance stand as it is, because that is the law, that is the action.
So you want to eliminate everything that was in our draft ordinance under K. I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. You want to eliminate everything under K regarding noise, and just say reference to the noise ordinance that the township has. Is that, am I
That-
correct that that's what you're asking?
If everything that you refer to under K is this one paragraph in italics, then yes, that is my amended motion suggestion that I'm bringing before you today.
Okay, so clarify for me what you propose the text of 60.02K to be.
I can offer that for you, like just the sentence that I wrote down,
Okay,
which was, would say, all land uses shall conform to applicable township noise regulations, period.
Beautiful. Yes.
okay.
And then if they change the noise regulations in the future, it
Then
still
it
is
automatically, we don't
appropriate
have to
based
go
on
back.
this,
Right,
right?
that's exactly why.
So you made a motion to amend, and is there a second for the motion to amend?
I'll second.
No, you just have to approve the amendment.
I can
No.
just approve the amendment, but
He's doing it right.
Casey has to agree to it too, because she seconded the original motion.
I'm good with that.
okay, so
I
you-
agree.
so you approve it.
So that, the way it stands now, it's all land uses shall comply with the applicable
Township
township
noise
noise
regulations.
ordinance. Okay. Mr. Shepherd,
Yes.
Ms. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Levinowski,
Yes.
Ms. Petrowski. Yes. Mr. Khan,
Yes.
Ms. McLaughlin.
Yes.
And we're
All
back to,
right.
I think what the
The
attorney said,
amended
just make the zoning ordinance a
motion
standalone document. So thank you.
And we have, so we're setting the zoning ordinance with the revisions to the township board with a recommendation to approve. Kind of a circuitous path, but we got there. Okay.
We all learned something.
I guess we move on to report of commissioners' committees. Are there any? No. Approval of minutes from October 21st, 2003. Would someone care to make a motion?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of October 21st, 2013 as submitted.
A second? I'll second it. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes pass and are approved. Report, I'm sorry?
I just want to make a comment regarding the minutes. In these minutes, it says the August planning and zoning, so the September planning and zoning that we did just get is actually in our correspondence. Are you understanding what I'm saying, Donna?
Yeah,
Okay.
so the September one.
September one needs to go in the
Yes,
correspondence.
we'll do it.
Okay. All right. Any reports and announcements? Fine. We move on to item 12, public comment. Mr. Quigley.
Thank you. Ms. Hamilton pointed out that there is this ordinance of sorts, and I'm confused because I hear, and I've heard this before, but I hear Donna say it's unenforceable. So what you've got is something that says, go look at that, but it's unenforceable, so you don't have anything. I'm just kind of confused about why you have it at all, then, if it's in there, so, because it's unenforceable, and I don't.
It's still on the books.
So it's on the books, but it's unenforceable, like you told. So I don't think you've accomplished much to help the noise situation in our township. Thank you.
I found some of the discussion here tonight very disturbing. First of all, I found it interesting that I seemed to be the only person in the room that knew there even was a noise ordinance. It's not my job, nor is it my role to inform a seated board or commission what exists at the township level. I just heard Mr. Quigley reference, and I listened to your discussion, that this noise ordinance is unenforceable. It was written by an attorney, or it was written by a planner and approved by an attorney, and the language starts out so that there will be an enforceable ordinance. And I find it interesting, once again, that here we are, and we've gone 180 degrees now, that it's not enforceable. And I found the whole thing very disconcerting. I think the township owes to its planning commission a book of the ordinances that exist. And I don't fault you, but I fault whoever appointed you, that you weren't provided with that information. And it's different supervisors, you weren't all appointed by the same board, but you should have had that. You should know that there's a sewer ordinance, because that comes into play if you approve some type of development here within the hamlet. And I think that the planning commission should request of the township board through its liaison that each planning commissioner be given a copy of those ordinances for your future reference. I'm almost scared not to come to a meeting, to be real honest. Thank you.
Any other public comment? We are adjourned at 9:37. Thank you.